The issue of whether or not a species is put on the endangered species list is a decision made by either NOAA or the Fish and Wildlife Service. And the Fish and Wildlife Service under the Bush administration listed the polar bear, and Alaska thinks that's incorrect. So that's a big battle in Washington, D.C. right now in federal court.
Well, it turns out the two countries that most of the polar bears are Canada and Russia. They refused to sign on. Why not? Well, it turns out that in Canada, which I know best, is the number of polar bears are at least double what they were 50 years ago. They're all controlled. The Inuits or Eskimos up there are allowed to take what they need for sustainability, and the polar bears are in great shape, right?
Not according to former Vice President Al Gore, who claimed global warming was leading to the extinction of the polar bear.
And what Al Gore said was that polar bears were threatened because they were going to have to swim 60 miles to find the ice because the ice was becoming short in the Arctic. I had a look at the paper that he was citing there. It was Monnet and Gleason, 2006. He presumably got an advance copy of it while he was making the film. And what that paper said was that 4 polar bears had died because there'd been a big storm and they'd been swamped by high winds and high waves. As we scientists put it, shit happens. Nothing whatever to do with global warming. And the judge was very angry about that because the paper was so clear. We just put the paper in front of the judge, said, here's the paper, this is what it says. Here are we actually were able to show where the 4 polar bears died because there was an overflight of the Beaufort Sea by a USAF aircraft taking pictures, and they were able to show exactly where the 4 polar bears had died, and it appeared in the paper. And I then did some extra checking, and I found that in the Beaufort Sea over the last 30 years, there has been no loss of sea ice at all. If anything, it's very, very slightly increased. So at no point was there any basis in truth or reality for what Al Gore was saying. And once again, there he must have been lying because he was citing a paper that at no point said that global warming was responsible for any of this. He just made it up.
But overall, polar bear populations seem pretty stable from the numbers I've seen. Again, just the raw data, the observations, the bear counts.
So the idea that somehow the polar bears are threatened has no basis in reality.
And this is why everyone is so worried about global warming. What might be causing this? Carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere actually blocks radiation from getting out away from the Earth, and it traps it inside the envelope of the Earth, making it warmer and warmer. So over years and years and years, it could have a major impact on our climate.
The advocates of global warming claim that the effects of human actions are increasing temperatures at catastrophic rates, ultimately affecting Earth's life forms. The polar bear represents the canary in a coal mine. By studying the population, the world should be able to see a decrease in bear numbers. Thus, using these numbers as a first alert system for global warming's destructive nature. If the example of the polar bear has been misrepresented, what other claims are inaccurate? Or even worse, have similar climate scares happened before under the guise of a different name?
Thank you, Senator. Senator Barrasso.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Welcome, Administrator Jackson. In an article today in Politico entitled, "Does Industry Cry Wolf?" on regs, you are quoted as saying, today's forecasts of economic doom are nearly identical, almost word for word, to the doomsday predictions of the last 40 years. And there's a picture of you today in Politico. It goes on, you're quoted as saying, "This broken record continues despite the fact that history has proven the doomsayers wrong again and again." So I just want to explore that statement, Administrator Jackson. 40 years ago, and you talk about 40 years ago, the same scientists that are predicting the end of the world now from global warming were predicting the end of the world from global cooling. I have with me a number of articles that I collected when I was in college. Newsweek magazine, The Cooling World. New York Times, a major cooling widely considered to be inevitable. One from Time magazine, another ice age.
Oh goodness, we've been dealing with this issue since the 1970s in terms of, is the climate getting colder, is the climate getting warmer? Back then the big scare was, hey, we're going to go into the next ice age.
Perhaps global cooling?
Now it's, global warming. And you notice that over the last 2 years, it's changed from global warming to climate change.
Back in 1970, a Newsweek article entitled "The Cooling World" stated that weather patterns have begun to change dramatically, dropping 1/2 degree, and assured that the evidence in support of these predictions has now begun to accumulate so massively that meteorologists are hard-pressed to keep up with it. Inevitably, no ice age came, as real-world observations didn't match the frigid predictions of the global cooling hypothesis.
The fact is that the same doomsday predictions from 40 years ago is all we are getting from this agency and this administration today. Only now the problem of the administration claims is man-made global warming, not natural global warming, not mostly natural global warming, we're not quite sure to what extent it is man-made. Nope, it's all man's fault. The administration believes that the greatest environmental threat faced by man is ourselves, our past economic progress, and this administration intends to issue the greatest pile of regulations in the history of the Environmental Protection Agency and perhaps the United States to combat that threat.
40 years later, we are now told to be increasingly worried of the opposite situation. The public is now warned to begin preparing for a drastic heating age. Should today's doom and gloom predictions for our future be any more credible than those of the past?
The villagers became wiser to the shepherd boy's ruse. His tales became fables written by Aesop or Goose. With wolf to warming, the boy began hanging his noose.
Continued observations are necessary to begin to understand the global warming debate. In searching for observations, we must look further than the polar bear. Much further. To objectively analyze global warming, we must first probe into space to determine if the warming is uniquely terrestrial, or if it is, in fact, interplanetary.